Welcome back, everybody. We're diving into some really interesting economic trends today.
Yeah.
Trends in jobs, inflation, and this kind of surprising surge in U.S. entrepreneurship.
Yeah, it is pretty fascinating.
We're going to be drawing from a bunch of sources today. Reactions to the January jobs report, some really insightful stuff from Federal Reserve Governor Adriana Kugler's speech on entrepreneurship, and of course, we'll be weaving in commentary from economists and all those market analysts.
Sounds like a good mix.
Yeah, and it's funny because you hear all this talk about recession fears and tariffs in the news,
Right.
but there's this kind of hidden story playing out, of resilience and innovation in the U.S. economy.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So we're going to
Yeah.
dig into that,
Right.
and we're going to explore whether or not this surge in entrepreneurship can really, overcome some of these potential economic headwinds that are out there.
For sure.
So let's start with the January jobs report. The headline number, 143,000 new jobs.
Okay.
Might seem a little underwhelming on the surface, right?
Right.
But the unemployment rate dropped to 4%,
Oh, wow. That's pretty good.
which is a pretty positive surprise.
Definitely.
But here's the thing that I think is really important, and the thing that everyone should be paying attention to,
Okay.
is the upward revision of job numbers for November and December.
Interesting.
So what that tells us is that the labor market actually finished 2024 on a much stronger footing
Right.
than we initially thought.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And what I find really interesting here is that this positive trend seems to coincide with, the Fed's recent rate cuts.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like they may have threaded the needle there.
Okay.
They might have actually prevented a labor market stall
Right.
while also managing to keep inflation from getting out of control.
Yeah, that's always the challenge, isn't it?
Always the challenge.
That balancing act.
Always the balancing act.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it kind of makes you wonder, do you think were the Fed's actions a key factor in this positive outcome?
I mean, it's possible, but I think, attributing everything to the Fed.
Right.
Might be a little too simple.
Uh-huh.
The economy's a complex beast
Oh, it is.
with a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
So while those rate cuts probably did play a role, you also have to think about other factors, right? Like consumer confidence or business investment.
Sure.
All those things could have contributed to the strong job numbers as well.
You're totally right. It's easy to kind of get caught up in, attributing cause and effect
Absolutely.
when things are this dynamic.
Yeah,
It's super important to look at the bigger picture.
for sure.
And speaking of, potential headwinds, Governor Kugler did address the elephant in the room, which is inflation.
Right.
She acknowledged the progress we've made since that peak in 2022, but she did point out that inflation has firmed recently.
Okay.
It's moving sideways.
Uh-huh.
And she was particularly concerned about goods inflation
I see.
and something called the non-market component of services inflation,
Interesting.
which I had to look up.
Yeah.
But it basically refers to things like healthcare and education.
Oh, okay. Where prices don't really respond to market forces in the same way.
Gotcha.
So it's a tricky area.
Yeah.
And this kind of, firming of inflation, it really raises the question, how does this affect the Fed's future decisions on these rate cuts?
Yeah.
I mean, what level of inflation would actually make them comfortable enough to say, okay, you know what? Let's start cutting rates again.
Well, that's the thing, right? There's no magic number.
Right,
The Fed, they don't operate on autopilot.
right.
They're looking at a whole bunch of different indicators
Yeah,
to assess the overall health of the economy.
right. And they have that, JOLTS data,
Yeah.
job openings and labor turnover survey.
Right, right.
And that gives them, insight into job openings and helps them kind of understand the dynamics of the labor market.
Yeah, it's a really helpful tool.
Yeah. And, it's not just data, though. They
Uh-huh.
also factor in things like, market sentiment and potential risks and what's happening in the global economy.
Oh, for sure.
So it's not as simple as just looking at one number and making a decision.
Definitely not. It's more of an art than a science, I think.
Yeah, it really is. They're constantly trying to find that, sweet spot where interest rates are doing their job.
Right.
They're not so high that they stifle growth,
Right.
but they're not so low that they fuel inflation.
Exactly.
So it's a tightrope walk.
It is.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about this surge in entrepreneurship
Okay.
that has everybody buzzing.
Yeah.
Governor Kugler spent a lot of time on this in her speech,
Right.
and it's definitely a trend worth diving into.
Yeah, for sure.
Because new businesses, they're often a really good sign of a healthy and dynamic economy.
Uh-huh.
And the numbers here are actually pretty incredible.
Okay. I'm listening.
In 2024, the U.S. saw a 30% increase in new business applications.
Wow. 30%.
30% compared to pre-pandemic levels.
That's huge. What do you think's driving all of that, and how does that, fit into the big economic picture?
Well, that's what we're going to unpack next.
Let's do it.
In her speech, Governor Kugler really highlighted that link between entrepreneurship and a dynamic economy.
Yeah.
She pointed out that these new businesses, they're often associated with higher productivity growth,
Right.
which is, obviously really essential if we're going to have long-term economic prosperity.
Absolutely.
So it's not just about like how many new businesses are popping up. It's about, what kind of businesses they are, their potential to innovate, maybe even disrupt industries,
Yeah.
shake things up.
Exactly.
And she even argues that policies that encourage business creation and, make it easier for workers to change jobs,
Wow.
that actually helps create a more dynamic and productive economy.
Yeah, that makes sense. If people are kind of stuck in jobs where their skills aren't being used, or entrepreneurs have to jump through a million hoops just to get started,
Right.
it's going to stifle innovation. It's going to
Crazy.
slow everything down.
And what I find really interesting is that the U.S. has seen a much bigger surge in these new business applications
Yeah.
than other regions, like the Eurozone, for example.
That's interesting.
So in her speech, Governor Kugler brought up that the U.S. had a 30% increase in applications.
Okay.
And she contrasted that with the Eurozone, where things have been moving at a much slower pace.
Right.
So, it makes you think about the long-term economic impacts,
Yeah,
of that difference in entrepreneurial activity.
absolutely.
And she seems particularly fascinated by Miami
Okay.
as this kind of case study in entrepreneurial energy.
Miami. What's going on in Miami?
Yeah, so she partly attributes it to their diverse population
Okay.
and the fact that immigrants play such a big role in driving entrepreneurship there.
Interesting.
So they bring fresh perspectives, a willingness to take risks,
Right.
a drive to build something new. And this really ties into her research, which suggests that policies that make it easier to start a business and easier for workers to change jobs, that really helps with dynamism and productivity. But it's not just about demographics.
Right.
She really emphasizes that Miami's success isn't just because of one specific group or nationality.
Yeah.
It's about the culture itself.
The culture, yeah.
She believes that Miami has created this really unique environment where entrepreneurship is actually celebrated.
Wow.
It's encouraged.
Wow.
And she argues that this cultural aspect, it's the real engine of dynamism in Miami.
Interesting.
Fostering this mindset where people are comfortable taking risks.
Mhm.
They want to innovate.
Yeah.
So it's this combination of a diverse population,
Yeah.
supportive policies,
Yeah.
and this culture that really embraces entrepreneurship.
So the question is, can other cities replicate that?
Exactly.
Mm.
What can we learn from Miami's experience?
Right.
And it's a question that I think policymakers and community leaders should really be thinking about,
Yeah.
because if we can figure out, what the secret sauce is in Miami,
Right.
we might be able to, bottle it up and replicate it in other cities
Yeah.
and foster innovation and growth across the entire country.
That would be incredible.
But even with this surge in entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
we can't ignore these potential headwinds that are facing the U.S. economy.
Right.
Inflation is still a concern.
Uh-huh.
Governor Kugler acknowledged that, the Fed's watching the situation very closely,
Okay.
especially that recent firming of inflation.
Right. It's a tough situation.
Yeah, it's a balancing act.
It is.
Because on the one hand, you've got all this incredible entrepreneurial energy
Yeah.
that's driving innovation, potentially boosting productivity.
Right.
But on the other hand, you've got these macroeconomic factors
Uh-huh.
like inflation, like potential trade tensions,
Yeah.
and those could really put the brakes on growth. And speaking of trade tensions,
Yeah.
it was interesting to see how the market reacted to that news
Oh, yeah.
about those potential tariffs.
Right.
It created a lot of uncertainty, a lot of volatility.
Makes sense.
And it really highlights how interconnected the global economy is.
Yeah.
One policy decision in one country can really ripple out
It can, for sure.
and affect market sentiment all over the world.
It's a delicate balance.
Right. So we
Yeah.
have all these different factors at play,
Yeah.
positive and potentially negative,
Right.
all influencing the economic outlook. So what are your thoughts? Do you think this entrepreneurial surge,
Okay.
can it be strong enough to overcome those headwinds?
I think so.
You think so?
I mean, it's hard to say for sure, but I'm cautiously optimistic.
Okay.
That entrepreneurial spirit, it's a powerful force.
Yeah.
It can drive innovation. It can create jobs. It can boost productivity,
Yeah.
but it's not a silver bullet. The Fed's decisions on interest rates, how those trade negotiations play out,
Right.
the overall global economic climate,
Uh-huh.
all of that will have an impact.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time to be following all of this,
It is,
with so much at stake, so many possibilities.
for sure.
So let's zoom in a little bit
Okay.
and look at some specific sectors,
Okay.
some specific companies,
That's good.
that are really capturing attention in this dynamic environment.
Yeah. What are you thinking?
Well, Governor Kugler pointed out that this surge in new business formation,
Uh-huh.
it's particularly noticeable in high-tech industries.
Oh, interesting.
And, those industries, they've always been a key driver of innovation and
Yeah.
productivity growth.
Right.
So I think it's worth taking a look at what's happening there.
Yeah, high tech, it's a sector that's always evolving.
Right.
New technologies, new innovations all the time.
Exactly.
It's a big part of this entrepreneurial wave.
Absolutely. High tech is definitely a hotbed of activity right now. And speaking of hot, Amazon's earnings report, well, that kind of set things on fire this week.
It did,
Yeah.
yeah. Their guidance was a little softer than some analysts were hoping for, I think,
Yeah,
which set the stock down a bit initially.
it did. But, as we were talking about earlier, Amazon, they're playing the long game.
Oh, for sure.
They're always willing to invest, heavily in areas they believe in. And AI seems to be their current favorite.
Yeah.
I mean, their CEO, Andy Jassy,
Yeah,
he was really enthusiastic about AI on that earnings call.
he was.
He even went so far as to praise DeepSeek
Oh, really?
as a more affordable alternative
Ah.
to companies like OpenAI,
Interesting.
which, kind of suggests they're not afraid to shake things up a little bit.
Yeah, that's a bold move.
Yeah, it's a smart move, though.
For sure.
Because the AI field is changing so quickly and, embracing competition, being open to different approaches, I think that's going to be key to staying ahead of the curve.
Absolutely. What about Tesla? They've been in the news a lot lately.
Oh, Tesla, yeah. Their stock has been all over the place. It's
Yeah.
a roller coaster influenced by, the overall market volatility,
Yeah.
but also some company-specific challenges.
Right. Right.
I mean, the EV market,
yeah,
it's getting more competitive every day.
it is for sure.
You've got all these established automakers and then these new startups all fighting for market share.
Yeah.
And Tesla's sales in China,
Uh-huh.
which is obviously a huge market for them,
Yeah, crucial for growth.
they've been a little sluggish.
That's not good.
So it's a good reminder that even the big players, they're not immune to challenges.
Right.
And investors really need to weigh those factors carefully when they're thinking about Tesla's long-term prospects.
For sure. Speaking of weighing factors, what about some of those smaller companies that are, making some noise?
Yeah, definitely. So one that caught my eye is SoundHound.
Soundhound.
They specialize in voice AI technology,
Okay.
and they just announced a partnership with NVIDIA,
NVIDIA. Wow.
which is, a major player in the AI space.
Yeah, they are.
So that could be a big boost for them.
It could be. That's a really strategic move.
Yeah, partnerships like that,
Uh-huh.
they can be really crucial for those smaller companies
Yeah,
trying to gain some traction.
exactly.
Another one worth mentioning is Pinterest.
Pinterest, okay.
They actually exceeded revenue expectations in their Q4 report,
Oh, wow. Good for them.
and they issued some strong guidance for Q1.
So they're feeling good.
Yeah, they're feeling good. It shows, that they're resilient,
Right.
even in that competitive social media landscape.
Yeah, it's tough out there. What about biopharma? Anything interesting happening there?
Biopharma, always interesting. There's a company called Telomere Pharmaceuticals,
Telomere Pharmaceuticals, okay.
and they're developing therapies
Mhm.
that are aimed at slowing down the aging process.
Wow, that's ambitious.
It is. I mean, if they succeed,
Yeah,
the implications are huge.
absolutely. It would be a game changer.
Yeah, it's a long shot for sure.
Right.
The research is fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, it just highlights the incredible potential of biotechnology to really, tackle some of humanity's biggest challenges.
It's a sector to watch, for sure.
Definitely. So I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We've explored, how these big macroeconomic trends intersect with that entrepreneurial spirit
Right.
that's really driving innovation.
Yeah.
We've analyzed the Fed's, delicate balancing act with interest rates.
Right. That tightrope walk.
Exactly. And we've dived into some specific companies,
Wow.
specific sectors
Yeah.
that are navigating this really dynamic environment.
It is a dynamic environment.
I think the takeaway here
Okay.
is that the U.S. economy, it's complex.
It is.
It's always changing. And understanding those underlying trends, the potential headwinds,
Right.
Those individual stories of innovation and disruption,
Yeah,
that's crucial if you want to navigate this landscape.
absolutely.
And I think maybe even more importantly,
Okay.
it's about embracing that spirit of exploration.
Yeah.
Always learn
Right.
it,
Keep learning.
because in a world that's constantly evolving, the most valuable thing you can have is the ability to adapt,
For sure.
to learn, and to grow.
Couldn't agree more.
So until next time, keep diving deep, keep questioning, and keep exploring this fascinating world around us.
Great advice. I'll be doing the same.